What's up, everyone? What's up, everyone? What's up, everyone? What's up? All right, looks like I have some feedback there. All right, we'll be starting the live impromptu. I should say impromptu. Today's our regularly scheduled BRAP, but decided not to do it tonight because it's a big evening for friends to gather the day before Thanksgiving here in the U.S. So decided to do a 12 o'clock stream instead. So we start the stream here shortly. Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to BRAP. Look, we were going to do the show tonight at our regular scheduled time at 9 p.m., but decided to do something earlier this afternoon because I'm actually off work today, getting ready for the holiday here. It's Thanksgiving here in the U.S. I have my own issues with the concept of Thanksgiving, which I will not get into on this podcast, but maybe kind of keep an eye on this and maybe creating a separate podcast to dive into more things that are political in nature. So just something that I'm toying with. But we do have with us the one and only, especially Lee Hampton. What's up, Hamp?
Nothing much, man. How are you?
Good, man. Just getting ready for the holidays, man. Kind of teasing the idea of this political podcast. I made mention of getting ready for the Thanksgiving holiday, but I have my own issues with the idea of Thanksgiving. I don't think it's so thankful, but that's another conversation. But anyhow, that's just my opinion on it. But yeah, no. So Hamp, thanks for hopping in, man. Like I said, I was telling the listeners, decided to do an early show because I have to get ready for the festivities tomorrow night, or tomorrow I should say, for the holiday. So, but anyhow, Hamp, are you all set for the holiday, man?
No, I'm not. There are new requirements being generated. So I'm not sure when. Yeah, I don't know when readiness will be achieved.
Hamp, there's always new requirements. especially when you've gone out to the store and you've left and you're told to go back out again.
Right.
Oh, can you pick this up? I just left. You got to turn around. Yeah, man, that's that's
and I should say those are new requirements from work. There are some.
Okay.
There are nitnoids at home as well, but those are kind of always there. But there are some new pop-ups from work on a day where I had signed indicating that I was not working, but that's turned out to not be the case entirely.
Well, that comes with the territory when you cross into the area of Hamp funds.
It does.
I mean, it really does. I mean, just. You get to a certain level professionally, those things, at least that's what I've found as I've kind of moved up. It's not as easy to walk away per se, or things come up where people actually need your attention.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it this week, and this is some I don't know, career management 411 for anybody who's on the podcast listening. But we go through the younger parts of our career convinced of this fallacy that, hey, once I become, director, VP, C-level officer, whatever, I will have less work to do and I will drive my own schedule. And as I've come up through the ranks, that is not the case. Those people spend more time working than I did. They have a little bit more control over that, absolutely, to a certain extent, or at least to drive it. But when I was a younger engineer and I went in to do some technical work on the weekend, there wasn't always somebody telling me I had to do that. I did that on my own, right? But now when a call comes in on the weekend, like it's not optional. So
yeah, no, that's a great point, Hamp. But well, look, let's dive into some of the gaming news topics because there are some things that are out there. Actually, this is related to the Activision. What's it called? Not the deal, but the regulatory review of the deal by Microsoft of Activision and VGC. And this was reported. Probably about a half hour ago. Sony's claim Microsoft's Activision Blizzard deal could hurt developers and lead to price increases in a new response to the UK regulator. Sony Interactive Entertainment said, faced with weaker competition, Microsoft could be able to increase console and game prices for Xbox users, including those that switch from PlayStation, increase the price of Game Pass, and reduce innovation and quality. So I think you'd agree with me, Hamp. No surprises here. Sony's not doing backflips and saying, "Oh, this is great for us. This is great for consumers." No, that's not. They're not going to do that, as I feel like discussed a million times here on the show. But some of the reaction, Hamp, as you can imagine, I think it's kind of interesting. Sony bringing that point up about increase in console game prices. And I got to be honest with you. Mooch, if you're listening, games media. Paul Tassi tweeted, Sony just raised regional PS5 prices and pushed for $70 games, and they have the balls to say this to regulators. LMAO. So I just want to rant here quickly before I get to your thoughts on this particular thing that just came out. One, like, no, Sony wasn't the ones that were just pushing for $70 games. I feel like if you're a journalist, like, you gotta, like, I don't know what, like, you can't just, like, paint Sony as the only ones that did that. Like, they weren't even the first ones to announce $70 games. Okay, so that's the issue that I have there. The other issue that I have is that, and while I do think it's interesting that Sony did bring up price increases, considering they've done those things themselves, and I would wager that Microsoft may use that as maybe ammunition in some kind of response against Sony, saying, "Hey, wait a minute." And actually, they have. Sony's done that. Microsoft did already do that. They did bring up the fact that Sony can basically increase prices without any, any impact, to their business, because they're so dominant in the gaming space. But I wouldn't personally. I wouldn't phrase it that way, and I would actually. I would have provided a little more context of the fact that what Sony's discussing here, if you read the article, they're discussing they're painting a scenario where Microsoft is dominating where Microsoft presumably could be dominating the gaming space, and that these things could happen as a result of that domination. So, again, just interesting takes by certain individuals in the gaming media, and it kind of goes back to, I think, what we've talked about in this show about gaming media, and what I've realized about gaming media, this generation at least, that some of the takes are just do nothing more than just to chum the waters and actually leave out key things that matter in the context of the conversation. And that key thing, the $70 thing, is what comes to mind. But yeah, so look, again, I don't disagree that, it's kind of, one would raise an eyebrow and say, what, it's interesting Sony's saying that because they've done similar things, but the context of what Sony is, how Sony's presenting it's a little bit different than I see some people saying, oh, well, Sony raised prices and claimed, that inflation was a part of that, and now they're calling out Microsoft for maybe increasing their own prices and game prices for Xbox users if this deal was to go through and then Xbox is in a dominant position. So what are your thoughts, Champ?
So on journalism, let me start with that. I have given my opinion of several prominent journalists, including Paul Tassi, who I definitely think present news with a skew. And so they're not reliable in terms of when you're looking for just the news, right? And one of my perspectives is, I have the capability myself to interpret news, and so I don't need it spun with analysis and perspective mixed in between the lines. I just need them to report the news. And Paul Tassi, Jason Schreier, what's the guy's name? Tom Warren. And I will include Windows Central, right? Unfortunately, those guys don't do that anymore. And so there's always a spin to it, so I just don't need their writings. I understand what people are saying, that, it's hypocritical of Sony and, somebody posted in the chat, manipulation of opinion by regulators. I'll convey again, the job of C-level officers of a corporation, the executives, the PR department, marketing, their job is to influence decision makers towards outcomes that are favorable for their business. It doesn't really matter that Sony has done similar things or arguably worse things. What matters is that, what else are they supposed to do? Right? Is Sony just supposed to say, yeah, this deal is good for us, no worries? And so consumers, I guess, and gamers are going to villainize and criminalize, whatever they choose to. I don't think that's a particular thing that I choose to pay attention to. The kind of like you mentioned, like none of these things that are said catch me by surprise in terms of allegations that Sony would render or concerns that people would render. In all of these regulatory commissions are also polling other members of the gaming industry for their consideration and their input, right, and their testimony, if you will, on how they think the deal will affect the industry. So naturally, in addition to Sony, like some people are obviously going to come out and say that they don't think that this is good, and that's not necessarily an anti-Microsoft program or platform. That is a pro-me platform, right, for any of those businesses. They're not going to say something that disadvantages themselves just in order to appease or not stand in the way or because it could potentially impact Microsoft. But Microsoft is a multi-trillion-dollar company. They will be okay.
Yeah, and I just what I find fascinating too is that people have taken this particular deal or this, the investigation, not the review, I should say, and have villainized either companies or the actual regulatory bodies themselves, which is weird to me because this is the norm for these types of things, for how these things are reviewed, for how the regulators behave, for, as you mentioned, Hamp, like how these companies are going to react and what they're going to say. I mean, you got to remember, Microsoft themselves actually said, COD's not really that big of a deal. Like, no, actually, no, anyone listening to that comment knows better. That you look at the numbers at Call of Duty Modern Warzone 2. What was it, like the fastest selling COD or something? Like did $1 billion in like 3 days or whatever the case was. I mean, yeah, like we know that, but you would expect Microsoft to be like, oh yeah, like Sony's right, COD's a big fucking deal.
Right, and I used the word. I said villainize. I should have used the term vilify. Right, and in sharp opposition to what I said about journalists and how I have a negative opinion of them always putting a spin on something, in particular in the gaming media these days. Right, what I'm saying is the job of the corporate executives and the people who are making quotables and sound bites, etc. By contrast, their job is to put spin on stuff. Their job is to influence a regulatory commission to arrive at a finding, in their favor. So, again, these things aren't. This is kind of like when there's a presidential election, you tune in mostly to the debates. There's a ton of barbs that get traded back and forth in between the debates that I don't know is particularly useful. Every once in a while, out of that bunch of content, there might be something significant that might be said. But by and large,
stand down and stand by.
Yeah, the he said, she said, throwing shade at each other in between debates is largely just useless politicking. And that's kind of my regard for what goes on, right? These commissions are going to find, right, based on their own assessments of their own competitive markets. They each have different cultural and historical and political backgrounds as to how they view things. I've commented that, the Industrial Revolution and the shakeout of it and the way big tech plays on in the commerce dynamic in Europe and overseas is vastly different than how it plays here in the United States. So there should be an expectation that they will view things differently. So it just, this continues to just be an interesting, happenstance, that unfolds on the road to making the final decision. But again, as I've mentioned several times in this past week, when gamers, big YouTubers, clout chasing Twitterers, come up with all these opinions about, like I said, vilifying these companies, often what they are doing is they are overlaying a false mythological moral framework, right? That doesn't really exist, and so it's an effort to, on the minute, on the spot, like legislate some new standard of ethics into being, and profess a lot of opinions as if everyone signed up to that, right? Or as if that's everyone's perspective. Again, a corporation is just a commercial entity that sells you goods. The attempt to overlay some of these, religious, moral, ethical frameworks in terms of how they are often viewed and spoken to, just doesn't really exist and is just a myth. And some people want to expend energy getting outraged over a mythological framework. I don't really see a lot of value in that personally.
Yeah, I don't either, and I just think that the conversations, like I see somebody saying somebody in the live chat says Sony's straight up lying. Like, me personally, and that's, if you feel that way, you feel that way. But I don't, and I can understand to extent how somebody might say they're lying, but it's not lying as much as this is how these companies are maneuvering in this, in the regulatory space and politicking, if you will, to say things that are going to benefit them, or maybe, like you said, influence a decision that benefit. And Microsoft's doing the same thing. But I don't like you said, like I don't give them apply like humanistic traits. Like, you know what I mean? Like I don't do that, because they're behaving in a way that companies just do and politicians do to drive desired outcomes. And so I don't, again, I see a lot of mental gymnastics on Twitter today about what Sony said. The only thing I would say is I'm not surprised. Microsoft's done the same. And these companies are going to trade barbs back and forth throughout this process. And that's just how it's going to go. Like it's, so yeah. So but I do think, Camp, some of the commentary from the media is really kind of just baffling to me. That's the thing, man. Like, I'm just like, I used to go back and forth with Mooch about, used to talk about, because he voiced his displeasure with the media last generation. I'm like, oh, they're not that bad, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm starting to see some of the commentary by media on this, and it's just like, when they're excluding things that matter, when you're making a comment or trying to make a point, to exclude, that, no, it's not just to kind of paint the picture that it was Sony that pushed $70 games. That's not an accurate description of what happened at all. And you're a journalist and you should know better, in my opinion. So,
yep.
I mean, it's just, anyhow. So that's the latest news that's come from Sony. But again, I do think it's interesting, Hamp, that they mention price increases on consoles and games when they've done the same thing, albeit different context, but the outcome's still the same. I do think that's kind of an interesting thing for them to point out, and I'm sure Microsoft's going to fire back on that very point.
Yep.
Yeah. So, the other thing that we found out too, Hamp, regarding this deal, that this was I think the New York Times article. I don't know if you saw this article. By the way, I'm sleeping on that Wall Street Journal subscription, man. I need to do that, Hamp.
You are get in now while the price is low,
dude. I am, and I, because I have Amex, you get a Amex member like subscription rate for Wall Street Journal.
Yep.
And I think it's like $1 or something. I forget what it is. Maybe it's $4 a month. I don't know, but yeah. So we found out New York Times reported that Sony actually rejected a 10-year deal from Microsoft to have CoD on PlayStation. I know, Hamp, we talked about this. I saw some people surprised that they did that. I don't think anyone should be surprised by that. And why is that, Hamp?
And I apologize, I blanked out for a second. BRAP, I thought I sent you, because while you were making those comments about Wall Street, I thought I sent you an article that, and I know I'm breaking from the agenda now, but I thought I sent you an article where there was an assessment that the holiday season, that the video game industry is bracing for a slow holiday season.
I don't think I saw that. Maybe you said it. I didn't see it. I don't know.
Yeah, with much lower earnings projected. So I apologize. So what was your question while I was distracted? Sorry.
No, and by the way, that's actually an interesting point because I'm not surprised by that they would see a slower. I mean, you got to remember they're also coming from very record highs, during the pandemic, in terms of engagement, dollars spent, things like that. No, I was saying the news that PlayStation rejected a 10-year deal to have Call of Duty on PlayStation from Microsoft. Sony said no. People were surprised. But we talked about this, and I mean, I'm not surprised by this at all.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about it in the background before. Look, any entertaining of any peace offering olive branch offered by Microsoft right now would be seen as Sony being complicit with the deal and being okay with it. It would be seen as kind of like that old saying goes, like every person has their price. It would just be seen as, so Sony did have a number in mind, and Microsoft found that number. What Sony is trying to present is they are hoping to influence a perspective that, by making this move, that there is kind of a clear and present danger to competitiveness in the market presented, and that this is, and even more so, that this is a slippery slope towards mass consolidation, right? And that even if the threat and problem isn't just this transaction, right, but that it will, will potentially lend itself to a landslide of other similar behaviors. And as you can see in the EU filings, the EU talks about, as I mentioned before, right, their concerns about the knock-on effects of this, not just in the gaming industry, but in competition of operating systems, which admittedly I think is a bit of a stretch, but there's no rubric for quantification of the threat to competition. It's simply the presence of it or not. It's a binary, and so there's that, and then they also mention cloud. So it didn't surprise me at all. What I mean, 5 years wasn't good enough. 6 years isn't good enough. Are we, by people saying that it surprises them or that they have a problem with Sony refusing it? Was there some magical belief that suddenly 10 was the right number? I think again that's a stretch of hope and imagination, I think.
Yeah, Wizard Gamer Live Chat says, and I haven't watched Hoglaw's video on this, but he said Hoglaw said this could backfire on Sony. I'm not sure how this is back. And again, I didn't hear his video. And his rationale behind that, but I don't know. Just quickly thinking about it, I don't know how that might backfire on Sony. Because again, I mean, Sony, if you agree to that 10-year deal, you're basically saying, "Hey, I'm okay with the deal," and that clearly that's not been Sony's positioning to the regulatory bodies at all. So I don't know. Do you see how that could backfire with Sony, Hamp?
No. It's arguable that maybe I sound like a hypocrite, but because I always say don't break things down into binary, but I am breaking things down into binary in this case. Again, I think Sony has one choice. They either support the deal and say that it's not a problem, or they say it is a problem and it presents a threat to the industry. And so if you're in for a pound, then you're in for a buck, right? And so that's all they're going to do, and they're not going to shift position on that. I don't know that there is compromise, right, in a way that makes sense. And let's also true things up. I also don't know that Microsoft is compromising either, right? Phil said himself, I'm not going to sign a deal that says I'm obligated to give Call of Duty to Sony with a bunch of baggage around that deal in perpetuity. I'm not going to sign it away forever. No company would do that. And he's absolutely right, but that's also an indication that he is also not willing to go as far as Sony might ask, and Sony in this case was not accepting of how far Microsoft was willing to go. So I don't place the blame, if you will, in air quotes, on one side or the other. Again, these are just businesses. They're trying to do the things that are best for them. And obviously, since they are competitors, they are highly unlikely to find a common ground where what's best for them is best for the other. This is another. Sorry, I'm gonna segue a little bit to a little philosophy here. A lot of people for the last 20 years or so have have pushed this notion of win-win, and I have forever since that statement came out said that's a, sorry for the language, that's bullshit, right? There are just things where there's not win-win, and this is a great classic example of that. There is no win-win for this between Microsoft and Sony.
Clearly, people that have that win-win attitude have never been married.
Well, I wouldn't go down that path. I think there is win-win in marriage. I think that's a prudent, healthy perspective to have.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I would say there is in some instances, but the point is that there's compromise. Like even in all jokes aside, like even within a marriage, and I've looked at marriage, and people may disagree with me. It's kind of a business relationship too, where you have two parties that often or sometimes don't see eye to eye, and they're going to jockey and say things to get a desired outcome that they feel like makes sense to them, that's right, or that benefits them, or they feel maybe benefits the relationship. And so I mean, like, look, I mean, these companies are trying, like you said, trying to drive a desired outcome that benefits them. All companies do this. Microsoft, it's funny, like there's a lot of hyper focus on people saying, well, Microsoft offered them 10 years, Microsoft's willing to compromise, Sony's not. Well, that's not entirely true, because if you go back and what you just said, Hamp, what Phil Spencer said, Phil's not really, I mean, yeah, he's not willing to give Sony what they want. So they're both at a point where they're like, this is what I want, and this is what I'm not willing to give up.
Right. And I mean, and Bobby Jackson in the chat, I think he said doesn't agree with me. No compromises, both sides not getting exactly what they want. The point is that the negative of not getting what each side wants isn't such that they aren't willing to push back on the get, right? What they would get out of it doesn't balance things. It doesn't make up for the thing that they won't get. And that's the point of why I don't think they're going to arrive at any type of compromise prior to the regulatory commissions making a decision.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because again, what Sony's trying to do, what Microsoft's trying to do, they're trying to make moves that are going to, again, impact the decision of the regulatory bodies that benefit them. And so there's probably not going to be any compromise until after that decision's made. And the regulatory bodies could, and they're trying to, the regulatory bodies could come back and say, hey, Sony, look, this deal is fine, and you take it or leave it, whatever Microsoft, take it or leave it. Or they may say, hey, you know what, Microsoft, you need to ensure or kind of make some kind of guarantee that these games are going to stay on the PlayStation platform so long as there's a PlayStation platform around, or whatever the case is, that you're not going to use, the CoD brand to damage your competition.
Right.
So I can't wait for this. I really can't wait for this deal to be over with, man. I really can't. It's just like, it's just, yeah. So, all right, Hap, any other thoughts on these developing matters as it relates to the Activision deal with Microsoft?
Nope, I don't think. Despite what lots of other people are probably saying out in social media, I don't think anything today changed. It's still the same status quo that it was before, and we're still on standby to wait for the regulatory commissions to make their decisions.
So here's an interesting perspective. I see this a lot from people. So like Apex Predator says, Sony hasn't given Microsoft anything in the gaming space, so I don't know why Xbox should give them anything.
I don't disagree, Apex, but I feel the same way from the Sony perspective. Again, the two companies are competing in the gaming market. I wouldn't expect there to be give. One of the things we've talked about, on this show is, when you look at teaming and partnering and
I'm sorry, Ham, can I chime in real quick? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just like to Apex's point, like, and I think Hamp, you and I would agree with that in the sense of, and you just said it, they're both competitors. They're going to mutually agree on things, Apex, when it benefits them to do so. Otherwise, it's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to do things that, make my business money, that position my product as the, premier dominant product, whatever, in the market that I'm competing against my competitors. I'm going to do those things, but I wouldn't say that that neither one hasn't given the other things, because they have when it's made sense, is my point. So go ahead, Amp. I'm sorry, man.
No, I mean you're right. You're right. They've given each other a thing when the get makes sense, or when they haven't had any choice, such as when Major League Baseball told Sony they were putting MLB on Xbox, and Sony didn't have a choice in that, right? So, like I said, these things will unfold as the industry evolves, and I don't think any of these things are a surprise. And I don't personally view either actor behaving in a way that I wouldn't expect.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I've seen this other thing too. Like Cycle Gamer says, it sucks because if Xbox buys Activision, they should be able to do what they want with the franchise, just like Sony's able to do what they want when they purchase studios. And I understand if you're somebody who puts money to something, the idea of you should be able to do what you want, but it's never that simple, especially with the magnitude, with how big this particular deal is compared to. And I always hear people saying, well, Sony gets to buy studios, they do what they want with them, but there's a big difference here. Just in terms of economies of scale, the Activision Blizzard deal is ginormous and bigger than anything Sony's ever acquired. Bigger than anything anyone's ever acquired in gaming. And actually Microsoft's largest acquisition ever, and they've made some big acquisitions. And it isn't just okay, they should have CoD and therefore they should do whatever they want with it. It's beyond just CoD. It's also, and the regulatory bodies talked about this, and you've mentioned this a lot, Hamp. It's what Microsoft also leveraging their adjacencies to put themselves in a dominant position that presumably CoD could help them achieve, and then how that impacts competition in the future. So a lot of people are focused on the today, but the regulatory agencies are also looking at the tomorrow. How does this acquisition impact Microsoft, its dominance in cloud game streaming? Microsoft would argue, well, cloud game streaming is not a big deal today. We don't use Azure. But no, that's what I'm saying. Like it's not about today. It's also about the impact of others trying to get into cloud gaming streaming in the future. Does this deal hinder that? So that's the other thing that to your point, Cycle. That's the thing that these agencies are looking at. And why the magnitude is much different, and why this isn't Sony can do what they want with their studios, but this isn't Sony. This deal is by far leaps and bounds bigger than anything Sony's done, which is why it's also good. And let's also remember, like Camp, like you and I've talked about this, like Microsoft, as much as the last decade or so, they've been trying to clean up their image from the Gates years, and you know what I'm talking about, like the antitrust stuff.
Yeah,
there's still people in those agency bodies and in Congress here in the U.S. that remember Microsoft during those days.
Yeah, and Microsoft also has not kept its image clean, right? They've still had infractions. They've still had instances where they've misstepped, and those were under Ballmer and even recently under Nadella.
In Europe, yeah.
With
the Azure thing, yeah.
Right, and I want to be careful here to at least for me to separate, right, when I'm voicing views and when I'm voicing perspectives, right, from different bases. So Cycle Gamer, as a business leader, I don't disagree with you. I personally feel like the reward for being competitive, for having a bunch of cash, should be that you should look. If I go out and I spend $70 billion on a thing, I should be able to do relatively what I want to do with it within the bounds of the law. And my example with Microsoft is, if I go out and I buy $70 billion for Activision, I should be able to make the choice to take Call of Duty and put it in Game Pass, right? That is my perspective if I were at Microsoft as a business leader. As a regulatory commission, I get and I understand why they're not a proponent of that, or why they would have concerns about that. So I agree with you that it sucks. However, I also can't take off the table that that that's the way it is, and that's the way it's going to be looked at, and the only thing that's going to, the thing that's going to decide, which way it goes is, which way these regulatory commissions decide. The thing that I'd dissuade is a lot of things that I see voiced by some other gamers that, oh, well, the CMA is out to lunch, they can't do anything, the European Union Commission is powerless, Microsoft is going to bully them and do whatever they want. That is a fool's perspective. From my view, you regardless of the size of your business, you don't get to just decide whatever you want to do. That power is not in your hands. These regulatory commissions have been granted the ability to make rulings. They have blocked mergers from happening before. They have levied significant, I would call it, process or competitive taxes upon these corporations when they have allowed them to merge, in terms of things that they have to do. They have, driven some of these businesses from divesting certain subsidiaries in order to let deals go through. So again, the fanboyism of, oh, Microsoft is just going to strong arm people to make this happen, I wouldn't buy that either. But
no,
but I agree with you. The analogy that I often lean on is Google, right? In the problems they encounter in the EU. The EU does a lot of, well, you guys should give up the algorithm, and I'm like, no, it's not on Google to give up the search algorithm. It's not their fault that they made the best search engine, right? And to a certain extent, they should be able to do what they want to do with it. So yeah, I don't disagree with Psycho Gamer. I do disagree with Bobby Jackson's perspective, but I think you're going to get to that when you talk about the super chat.
Yeah, real quick, I agree with what you said regarding Cycle's perspective. Like, I get that perspective, like that you should be able to do what you want, considering you've paid money for it. But there is a piece I don't agree with. The comparison that I often see is just like Sony's able to do what they want with the studios they purchase. The magnitude, the economy of scales of those two things are completely different. So just food for thought.
Yeah, they are. I guess where I break with that, again, if I were sitting in the boardroom at Microsoft, where I break with that is I think there's an argument to be had about the impact of that, right? So what I could say is, look, as Microsoft has voiced, right? Look, Sony's the market leader. They have an incredible stable of first-party properties. They've done just fine. When our companies have been separate, by putting the companies together, that doesn't really change anything. Call of Duty is still Call of Duty. And we're going to drive the competitive choice for some gamers to then go play it in Game Pass, for instance, if we take that scenario, versus paying $70 for it on Sony. Many of the Sony faithful and loyalists are going to pay $70 for Call of Duty and continue to play it on PlayStation. There are going to be a handful of people which might change camps, but I don't know that number, that percentage is a significant pendulum swing. And I think that's where, right, some of those arguments get into, there is scale, but what's the impact of the scale?
Yeah, it's impact.
If the impact really isn't that big.
Yeah. By the way, I do think the deal still goes through. I've said this a bunch of times on the show. I still think the deal goes through, and we'll forget about this after a year, as we tend to do. Let me get the $10 super chat from Bobby Jackson. Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate it. Appreciate the $10 super chat. Says Sony doesn't want any competition, and this deal should at least make Microsoft competitive. I fear the day of having just one company in the gaming industry with no comp, no matter which company it is. All right,
yeah,
you go ahead.
Yeah, so the blade where I disagree with that is, Microsoft shouldn't need anything to be competitive. They're a multi-trillion-dollar company, and again, what I'll go back to is there's one corporation that's to blame for Microsoft being in third place, and that's Microsoft. And I understand the fearing the day of having just one company in the gaming industry, but I think there are many arguments and sometimes valid arguments that is what will be the result of what Microsoft is doing. Now, here's where everyone's really going to hate me. I know that you guys already hate me, but let me turn the volume on that up even more. The body of people who are driving the game industry towards mass consolidation aren't the corporations. It's the consumer base. And it's the consumer base because the consumer base predominantly buys AAA games, because even when AAA games come out that have $80 million plus budgets, we find lots of shade to throw at all of those games. We set bars and perspectives of what minimums are, and those things drive production costs upward constantly. So the people who are driving mass consolidation is us. I hate to repeat myself, and yes, I appreciate that component. I use the term hate somewhat jokingly, but I go back to the thing that I posted at the beginning of the year, which said, look, all of you guys saying you don't want $70 AAA games, fine. Here's a list of 25 to 30 non-AAA games that were of the same quality as a lot of the AAA games that you guys are playing that sell millions and millions of dollars of copies, or millions and millions of units of copies. How many of these have you played? Or I would suggest that you go play these games. When I posted that, I heard crickets. And those games continue to not be in the zeitgeist of like the numbers that have sold. And these were a list of games from 2021. So the issue is that, again, in a holistic understanding of economics would yield that, and of markets and of a capitalist market and a free market would yield that it's impossible for the suppliers solely in and of themselves to be driving a dynamic in the market. It must, by definition, be a combination of the behaviors of the suppliers and the consumers. And so, like I said, we're a big chunk of the blame of what's driving mass consolidation.
We love our bangers, man. We love our bangers.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, by the way, hold on a sec here. Victor also says, BRAP, the problem I see is even if Microsoft accepts to put CoD on PlayStation Plus, that wouldn't work for Sony because they won't gain the sales. Are you saying they won't get... what do you mean they won't get the sales? You mean like retail sales? I'm sorry, I'm not following you, Victor. Do you understand what he says, Sangham? The problem is I see even if Microsoft accepts to put CoD on PlayStation Plus, that wouldn't work for Sony because they wouldn't gain the sales.
Oh, he means that Sony wouldn't get their 30% take of the sale.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
Right. And I mean...
that could be, yeah. Go ahead, man.
But that's a really good thing that you bring up, Victor. Again, going back to the notion that it's just Sony that's not accepting compromises, right? Like that could be a compromise if Microsoft offered it. I don't know that they haven't. I also don't know that they have. They could have offered, look, we're going to put COD on Game Pass, but we'll offer you guys to put it on PlayStation Plus. But I don't know that conversation's been had. So,
yeah, no, that's a great point. I'm sorry. More at BRAPs are coming in. Yes, retail. Okay. Apex Predator says, if they didn't buy Bethesda and now ABK, they wouldn't be comp because Xbox had 4 studios while Sony had way more. Plus, Xbox was gonna die.
But again, the only reason Xbox only had 4 studios was because of Microsoft. It's not like Sony bought studios from Microsoft, or it's not like Sony held Microsoft at gunpoint, mugged Satya Nadella in an alley and said, give up the studios or else.
Give us now. Give us a studio now.
Right. Those are choices that Microsoft made. And they, Microsoft could have pursued, not saying that it would have been prudent, Microsoft could have pursued the Embracer Group strategy, right? And run around and bought up a bunch of studios that Sony wasn't even interested in and wasn't paying attention to. They could have followed the Tencent strategy and gone and made investments in a lot of companies, or tried to make strategic maneuvers like Tencent has made in making investments in not Ubisoft, but in the holding company that owns Ubisoft, right?
And Epic Games.
Yeah. So, again, Microsoft has a ton of resources. They're the ones who decide how to apply them and where to put them to use. And their choices have led them to the state that they're in. By the same token, I don't personally believe Sony, even if Sony, let's use the term blocks in air quotes the deal, right? Or influences these. That's not end game for Microsoft. Microsoft still has a ton of choices that they can make, still has a ton of cash to go out and throw around. Still has a huge strategic footprint and position, particularly as things get more cloud-based, particularly as things...
So, Hamp, are you saying, you say more, particularly if things get more cloud-based, are you saying as things move from on-prem to the cloud?
Well, and even more so in the development environment, right? Not solely for.
I just had to throw that word out there because I heard it so much the last 2 weeks, man. I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, no. I even use it in I even catch myself sometimes using it in common conversation that has nothing to do with IT.
Oh man. Yeah, we're on prem.
Yeah, am I eating lunch today on prem, or am I getting it in the cloud?
Oh my goodness!
but yeah, so I mean, again, even if this deal doesn't go through, it's not end game for Microsoft. Microsoft has a vast capability. Like again, if they don't get COD, they still have 24 studios, right, to make decisions about what to do with. So, and plenty of other studios that are on the market that are available, for the taking, so to speak.
Yeah, hey, real quick, Capono 5150. I have a 3070 GPU, and I see you and Kurtachi talking about Cyberpunk 2027. I am running it at 1440p, all ray tracing set to high or whatever it is, and obviously using DLSS, and I'm getting about 80 frames per second in areas where it's there's a lot of like a lot of NPCs, and it does dip down about 50, but look, I mean, I don't know, man. I think a 3070 is depending on what unless you're trying to do 4K ray tracing, I think 3070 if you're at 1440p should be fine. Any thoughts on the ham for Capono 5150? Sounds like he's looking at cards, so.
No, I mean, not with specific regards to Cyberpunk.
Kurtachi's saying he's worried about the memory on it. The memory on the card. It's got 8 gigs of memory or something. He's worried about that.
Yeah. So sorry. It just so Capono is the question. Are you worried about whether or not the 3070 will be good enough, or do you think you need to step up to a 3080, 3080 Ti, 3090 for the extra memory? I just want to make sure that's what the conversation is about.
Yeah. It looks like he's Kurtachi's saying he's wondering if it's going to be enough for him, but yeah, he's saying is 8 gigabyte VRAM enough.
Right.
I mean, I haven't had any issues with the 3070 and the 8 gigabytes of VRAM not being enough. I mean, I'm playing Call of Duty on extreme settings. Is it ultra extreme? I forget, and I haven't had any issues.
Yeah, and I mean, Cryptology, without specifically having played Cyberpunk 2077, I would also, and I understand it's a specific concern about that specific game, and if that's the driver, then I understand Capono wanting to nail his decision about that. But the other side of that is I will agree with BRAP in terms of just from anecdotal evidence and everything that I play, 8 gigabytes for me has never been an issue. There are games that I crank everything up and I'm still using 4 gigabytes, 6 gigabytes of VRAM. That being said, it also depends on what you like to play and how you like to play. One of the things that I often talk about that I often think is comical, you'll hear a lot of things out in the gaming community about how much hardware you need to do something like run CoD or, run some of these first-person competitive shooters. And I'm like, anybody who really plays those games competitively, that's the first thing that they turn off. I'm not dropping frames in Call of Duty so that I can run ray tracing, right? So ray tracing gets turned off. And some of your really big competitive players, will play on 24, 25-inch monitors at 1080p. So again, those things normally aren't impacting. The reason to really run a big card, I think, is when you do want to run at 4K. I think that use case is for specific consumers. I run at 1440p. I actually, because I spend a lot of time working on the computer, not just playing games on it. I don't like 4K because of how it handles things in the desktop environment. So I largely agree with what Cryptopsy is saying in that I think a 3070 will be enough. But,
Yeah, I think especially if you're playing 1440p, playing at 1440p, and then again, you can always, if the performance is for a particular game isn't where you want it to be at, you can always change settings, tweak things. I mean, there's certainly workarounds and there's flexibility there for you to get the performance you want. But I would say if you're looking at 4K gaming, I wouldn't recommend a 3070 in my opinion.
Yeah. Do you want to get you got the other super chat in there? Because I do.
Oh yeah, let me get that other super chat. And I hope that helps Capono. By the way, all right, Bobby Jackson, the $5 super chat. Thank you for that, Bobby. And by the way, real quick, Cam, I want to say something else. Another talking point that seems to come up is that Microsoft's not competing because they're buying studios, and I 100% disagree with that. Actually, they are competing. That they're just spending money to compete. So. Or having the ability to spend money is, I think you've said this too, is competition or competing.
Yeah, I never saw Muhammad Ali fight a whole boxing match with one arm tied behind his back. Why would we expect Microsoft to?
Exactly. It's a great analogy. Bobby Jackson says, if they lose, with the $5 super chat, thank you for that, Bobby, says, if they lose this deal, it wouldn't surprise me if Microsoft tries to sign an exclusive long-term deal with Activision. He said Activision Bethesda? No, I think you mean Activision.
I think he means Activision Blizzard, and
Blizzard, yeah.
and the reason I wanted to make sure you called that one out, like this is the thing. I absolutely agree with you on that note, Bobby Jackson. I also want to make sure that we found an opportunity in the conversation for me to agree with you, since I'm sure it sounded like I just disagree with everything that you say. That's not the case. What I've said before is like a lot of these arguments come up about Microsoft is buying Activision so they can put CoD in Game Pass. I'm like, there's nothing that prevents Microsoft from putting CoD and Game Pass now, right? There's no legal restriction against that. They just have to make a deal that Activision would agree to. So, and again, for a multi-trillion-dollar company, every company has its price. I'm sure that there is a number that where Activision would agree to that. The move to acquire Activision Blizzard is about more than just CoD. It is about more than just putting CoD in Game Pass, is my personal opinion.
Yeah, it's also about mobile. I mean, I think Phil Spencer talked about that too. So, but thank you for that super chat, Bobby. We have the great Gaming Forte just join us. I think Forte just woke up. What's up, Forte?
No. Forte is at work.
Woo!
He just wanted, you went live early.
I need to talk to you.
That's fine. You went live early.
That's fine.
I was sitting there.
Yeah.
I was sitting there and I was like, you know what? Let me jump in for a hot second just to tell everybody, have a good Thanksgiving and have a great weekend if we don't get a chance to see or talk to you guys on Twitter or whatever. And enjoy the stuff that you're playing, man. It's a great time out here.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Microsoft out here giving people 10-year deals and stuff, it seems. But
give me a 10-year deal. I'll take it.
I'll take a 10-year deal too. But yeah, man, I just wanted to come in and say, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Hope you enjoy the weekend. It's crazy as heck here. It's nobody here right now, so that's why I can do it. But it's like, man, I'm dreading.
I need to talk to you, Forte.
Tonight.
I need to talk to you.
Talk to me. What do you need to talk to me about, man?
I need to talk to you. I need to talk to Forte.
You need to talk to Forte.
I need to talk to Forte. So Forte
loves you too.
I do love you, Forte. You know that.
Yeah, I know.
Dude, Pokemon. You said there was 300 copies? Like, what is happening? You said, I think you said that this was a bigger launch than, again, I'm not saying this is everywhere. This is Forte's store. This was like bigger than what you had for Call of Duty.
I had stores in my region that outsold me. So just to put that in perspective.
Yeah.
I sold over 300 copies in one day. And for the weekend, I had more stores outsell me. And our region is over 300 stores. So
jeez.
It was a lot of Pokemon being had out there.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So let me ask you something real quick, Forte, while we have you, because you're the resident retail expert here.
Yo.
Hamp mentioned this earlier, that there was an article that the gaming industry is predicting lower sales for Black Friday than last year. Mm-hmm. I mean, are you picking up on that vibe? Like, what are you seeing out there, man? Or do you think that it's?
Are we just talking about in gaming in general?
Yeah, in gaming and your store, like the buzz around the people coming in your store, like what's the temperature you're getting out there?
It's kind of hard to say because last year we had the lust of everybody wanting to still get these next gen consoles and stuff. I think they're readily available. If you want one now, you could pretty much get one. So they're not really doing any huge Black Friday deals or anything like that. I think the only console that's on a deal is the Series S right now.
Yeah, $250. That's a great deal.
It's a great deal. But you can get that right now. You don't have to wait till Friday. So I don't know exactly what it. I do know there's some pretty good deals on some games that's going to be Friday only. But in general, I mean, I can see it being lower because I don't think the rush to get consoles, which is going to be the biggest piece of that pie, I don't see that being the draw to this Black Friday. Now, it still could because, some people just like to go out and shop and do all of their shopping and stuff like that on Black Friday because it's just a perceived notion that they think things are on sale. And plus, they know everybody will have things because they have them in their ads. But I mean, I don't know if it's gonna. Well, then also, you also got to think about this too. A lot of retailers were closed on Thanksgiving last year too, and GameStop was open on Thanksgiving last year. So I think the fact that they're going to be closed on Thanksgiving and open just on Black Friday, that's going to be a huge boom because I think on Thursday last year we did ridiculous amounts of revenue just in one day of sales. So I can kind of see that kind of spilling over to just Friday and it being a little bit busier on Friday from like a GameStop perspective.
Yeah.
But when it comes to everywhere else, it just seems that, everybody started their Black Friday sales like Sunday.
Yeah, I felt like they started really early this year.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard. It's kind of hit or miss. It just really depends on what people are, what retailers are holding, as a Friday doorbuster. But you don't even really hear the word doorbuster anymore. So that's why I kind of think that it's
doorbusters.
Hemp might be right on that. It may be a down year, but it won't be a down year just because people aren't interested. I just think people that truly wanted the things that they wanted already got them, or they're in the process of getting them over the course of this week.
Mm-hmm. So just to be clear, this is not Hamp's hypothesis. This is not
Hamp's.
This is the Wall Street Journal. I mentioned that because I am always a proponent of pushing people to reliable reporting outlets, as many of the references that the games community leans on are not reliable or credible. So if I can, so the article specifically is: video game companies brace for lackluster holiday season. The industry is at risk of posting its first annual sales decline in at least a decade. And I'll just read the first couple paragraphs. The global video game industry is facing its first annual sales decline in at least a decade as the pandemic fades and inflation and recession worries persist. In their latest earnings announcements, major publishers issued sober outlooks for the current quarter, which is typically their biggest by revenue because of the holidays, as people spend less time at home and grapple with higher prices for everyday goods. Quote, "We recognize that the risk of the global economy slowing down is increasing further," Sony Group Corporation's finance chief Hiroki Totoki said on an earnings call earlier this month. Users of the company's PlayStation consoles appear to be playing a smaller number of titles out of a desire to spend less money, he said.
That's
interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
When I hear that, okay, so if they're just talking, so are they talking about holiday in general, Hemp?
This is specifically about the video game industry and its expectations for a lackluster holiday season.
Okay, so they're talking about not just Black Friday, but the holidays in general.
Yes, they're talking about for Q4.
Oh yeah, I don't think that they can match. I mean, it's the same thing I always tell people in sales. Like, when I talk to my team or I talk to like other managers in my district, when they talk about how I'm supposed to comp against last year, how I'm supposed to comp against this year. If my store is always on the 15 to 20, 30% increase, how am I supposed to maintain that? And I always say, well, at a certain point, you're not going to keep hitting those thresholds because everything has to equalize at some point. And in gaming, we have seen huge booms ever since the pandemic hit in 2020. So it's only a matter of time until those numbers have to reset. And why not
That's a great
reset
point,
this year? This year is going to probably be the year where you don't have, those November, we had God of War, but we don't have those blockbuster November titles that we used to have, like one or two of them in one quarter at the end of the year. We had God of War and Call of Duty and everything like that, but we don't have anything else to kind of sustain that past the holiday. So I can see it doing well, but I also think that a lot of people were buying a lot of consoles and stuff earlier, over the last couple of years and stuff, and you don't really have to see people rushing out to get them right now because most people already have them. So yeah, I can definitely see this year being it, because you're in the third year of a massive incline, and sooner or later you're going to hit that peak. And at some point, the holidays is always the biggest revenue generating time of year. One of those years you're not going to hit it, and I can definitely see this year being the year they don't.
Yeah, I mean by
the way, I want to make sure that we inform the chat that this is Forte, future CEO of GameStop. So I'm always interested to hear his perspective on retail.
Yeah, Forte, you really should be CEO of GameStop. I'll just throw that out there.
Man. Listen, man. Listen, when the golden parachute came, I make sure I take care of everybody on BRAP. We all get paid. We all get paid together when the golden parachute drops.
Thank you, man. Speaking of retail sales, did you guys see this? God of War Ragnarok has sold 5.1 million copies as of its debut last week. It's a fast-selling first-party launch for Sony. It's a franchise record for God of War.
Yeah, and you know what's gonna get announced sometime next week? Pokemon hit 10 million in 1 week.
What's that?
You know what's gonna get announced later on next week?
What's that?
It's gonna say that Pokemon hit 10 million in the first week.
That wouldn't surprise me.
That's just freaking ridiculous.
Yeah, when you described, I was like, "What?"
It's so ridiculous, bro. Like, not giving any hard numbers, but Friday, I was literally talking to customers about it this week, and he said, "You ready for Black Friday?" And I was like, "Man," I said, "Black Friday happened last Friday."
Pokemon Friday.
I was like, man, last Friday was ridiculous. It was like
Pokemon Friday.
Just at the midnight alone, my store had 70, and then we did another 300 so sales on Friday. So it was like, it was just ridiculous. Like, people. And then the funny thing is, a lot of people were acknowledging that the game had issues, because I did have a couple of people that, came back, returned the game. Not too many people, but some people did. But a lot of people were still saying, man, outside of the technical difficulties, the game is actually really fun and I really enjoy it. And I'm like, man, if this was Xbox or PlayStation, we'd be reeking them over the coals if it was something to do with a game not working correctly. But it's a whole different type of breed when it comes to Nintendo fans and the games that they play, because people keep talking. I was listening to you guys on on Crossfire last week. You guys were talking about performance and stuff. And I was like, man, the only people that really truly care about performance is Xbox and Nintendo, the Xbox and PlayStation and PC gamers. When it comes to the Nintendo gamer, some do care about it, the ones that have, high-end consoles or high-end PCs. But for the majority of them, they just want to play a good game, and that's kind of all they care about. And Nintendo finds themselves in a stratosphere where no other company can kind of get away with that as of right now. And it kind of benefits them. But in general, it was just interesting to see the dynamic of how many people truly was coming out for pretty much a game that a lot of people say, I don't like Pokemon. I don't know what a Pokemon is. But compared to all the people that do love it, it's like we're drastically outnumbered.
Yeah.
I think one of the differences, and I wish we had enough insight into this, so I can only go off, other evidence that I believe strings this theory together. I think the difference is when those sales numbers come out, Pokemon selling $10 million, obviously tons of people in the gaming community will look at that as like a reason to do a victory lap and a win of being better than Sony or an SIE exclusive. I think part of the difference for me is I don't know that I believe that tons of third-party publisher games sell at those levels or really anything near them on Nintendo. Right. I mean, I know Nintendo does great numbers, but those great numbers are predominantly their first-party titles, and a very small number of third-party titles, and mostly the ones that are exclusive.
Right.
Whereas, when you look at the sales numbers on the Sony platform, you know, third-party publishers see Sony and Xbox as well as a place where they can deploy to and sell millions of copies. So I just don't know that the weighting is equivalent when those sales numbers get reported in terms of their overall significance.
No, I agree. I think you're 100% correct on that. But I also think the biggest difference really comes down to when it comes to the revenue generated that they make. PlayStation drops prices on their stuff pretty consistently. I mean, they even have a greatest hits where those games drop to $10 to $20, after they hit kind of a lifetime of just selling. Compared to Nintendo, we're still buying Mario Kart at $60, and that game's been out since 2017. Animal Crossing's been out since 2020, and they're still selling it for $60. I mean, right now it's on sale for $40 because it's the holiday. But as soon as the holiday's over, it's going to go right back up to it's going back up to 60. And people are going to buy it at 60 even a year from now, even knowing they could have bought it at a cheaper price. So I think the biggest thing is when you look at when you see Mario Kart at 50 million sold or whatever the crazy number is at, the majority of those sales are somewhere in the realm of $50 to $60 for each copy of that game that's not packaged in a Switch bundle with it. And the same thing goes across the Animal Crossing stuff. So I think when you kind of look at overall sales number, I think, at least in my eyes, yeah, I think Nintendo does really, really well with their first party, but third party, they could care less because Nintendo doesn't make their systems for third party. They make them for first. All they care about is how it's going to perform on their system. And third party just look at it as like, hey, if we want to put it over there because it's a chance to hit the lottery. Like we all play the lottery, but we all know we probably ain't going to win, but we still waste our money to do it. And that's what these third parties do. They say, hey, it's a chance that we could hit. It's a chance that we don't hit, but it's also a chance that, we will get some residual sales out of that system. It may not be nothing to sneeze home about, but at least we did. And Nintendo is perfectly fine with that because guess what? They're going to make up all that margin that they're losing to everybody else in third party. They're just going to make it up in first party when it comes to not dropping their prices on their games. And, that is something consistently that we didn't see from Nintendo from the beginning, pretty much.
Yeah, no, that's a
agree.
Go ahead, yeah. Yep.
Nope, I was just saying I agree.
Yeah, that's a great point, Forte. Let me get this super chat here. Excuse me, about to sneeze. Hold on.
Hit you.
All right, sorry about that. I had to sneeze. So $10 super chat by Cycle Gamer. Thank you for that, Cycle Gamer. Says magnitude shouldn't matter. I think this is in regards to when we were discussing the difference in magnitude of the Activision acquisition compared to Sony buying studios. He says magnitude should not matter. If Sony's able to buy a bunch of small businesses and lock Microsoft out, Microsoft be able to buy bigger businesses and lock Sony out. Microsoft should be penalized for doing well. And then he follows that up with another super chat, $2 super chat. Thank you for that. Cycle Gamer says protecting Sony's position should not be a factor. So you say protecting Sony's position he's referring to the regulatory bodies.
I agree with that, but I also think that if Microsoft didn't make the purchase of Bethesda 2-3 years ago, and this was the first one that they made, I don't think this type of scrutiny will be on top of them. I think it's just a simple fact that they bought one publisher and then they turned around and then they bought another one. And it just happens to be that Call of Duty is the biggest franchise in gaming right now. So it's a lot riding, especially on Sony's coattails when it comes to that title. So they're putting up a really big stink about it. And I mean, they should, because that's what you should do as a corporation. But I just think that when Microsoft made these moves, I don't think they made the Bethesda move knowing that they didn't know that they was going to be in a running for something like, Activision 3 years later. They just reacted to something that they had a good opportunity to, jump into and say, hey, let's make this purchase because the price is really good. And at any other time, would they have did that if Activision didn't have all of the sexual allegations, all the allegations against the company and stuff, and the stock dropped to like $63 a share? I mean, I don't think they would have made that move to do it. It just happened to be that they made a big purchase not even 3 years ago, and now they're looking at them kind of funny. And Sony, because Sony didn't bat an eye at the Activision, at the Bethesda deal. You didn't see them come out, talk about anything in press releases or anything like that. It was just when the Call of Duty stuff came through, and then they started talking about how it could be influential by putting it inside the services like Game Pass, because you see what they're doing with the games that they got from Bethesda now. And now you're starting to see that come up because of the track record, and people bring that up, the track record of what they did in their previous purchase. They took it away from Sony and they put it in Game Pass. And that only happened because they did that initial purchase and they have some type of, vendetta. Not gonna say vendetta, but they just have like an issue with that and hope that they don't do that with something like Call of Duty 2.
I don't disagree with you that things that happened as a result of the Bethesda acquisition have an impact on how the ATVI Microsoft Activision is viewed. I would, however, say that just simply based on scale, there was, again, I apologize about the language, there's no flipping way in hell Microsoft was not going to get scrutinized about this deal, particularly in the EU and particularly in the US, simply because they're one of the big five in tech. So Amazon, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, any of those five moves a muscle, right, at this level of magnitude, they are going to get drugged through the coals. I mean, I think it was Facebook that just, I think they were trying to acquire Giphy or something, and just got that unraveled in the EU.
Yeah, that they had acquired Giphy, and now they can't acquire them anymore, or they can't. That deal's not going through, or whatever the case is. Like, I think they acquired them, and then they were told to like spin them off or something, or I forget what it was. But either way, that deal's not happening. It's dead. But to your point, Amp, that was a result of, look, we said this a million times on the show. It's hunting season for tech companies right now.
Yeah, and Captain Ply brings up a great question. If Activision is such a big moneymaker, then why is it up for sale? If you're making bank, you don't sell. Okay, that's a great question, right? I would say two things. So we know that literally Satya called Activision after one of the big allegations against Bobby Kotick broke. I think it was the one where he where they'd found evidence of him making death threats against his former assistant. But some big story broke that was a negative for Activision, and literally Satya called to start this discussion like that weekend. And it was basically hey, why don't I take that off your hands for you? And that may be a bit of an extrapolation, but we'll just go with that for imagery's sake. The other thing I would say is, I would say, and unfortunately I can't point out this exact interview, but look for an interview with Strauss Zelnick, in an outlet that's actually not a video game outlet. They're like an entertainment outlet. And I watching that interview, I just hadn't had the opportunity to dig into these details. Strauss Zelnick and his grasp of finance and why he does the things that he does in the gaming industry is pretty amazing. And I would say one of the things that he brings out is he talks about having a monstrosity like Call of Duty and the huge production pipeline, right, that is strung together to make that thing go, right? 9 studios-ish, right? Converting the entire company over to Call of Duty. And because it's a game as a service, the immense amount of cash flow that has to be managed to make that thing go. Money constantly coming in and going out for expenses. And he talks about when you'd have a large monstrosity like that sitting on top of a comparatively small capitalization base, that causes problems in your financial outlook. And that causes problems when people are looking at and trying to ascertain whether or not it is sustainable. That causes problems like if you have breakage in that cash flow, then there's impacts, right, of of people who need to get paid, who have T's and C's of, invoice plus 30 days, and things of that nature. So I would say take a look at that interview, and I think that interview brings out a lot of the financial reasons about why Activision is up for sale, because I think there were some financial arguments about how long that thing was going to work without having the financial basis of a multi-trillion-dollar company like Microsoft. And then to delve from there into my own hypothesis that I've offered, which is that a lot of these companies, a lot of these third-party publishers who are trying to, again, who are being pushed to accommodate these increasingly spiraling upwards production costs to make the AAA games that gamers are asking for, where even when they come out, gamers are still not satisfied. That type of business model is not sustainable and is going to drive a lot of these third-party publishers to get closer and closer, if not being directly acquired by platform owners, because it's going to get increasingly financially difficult to be a standalone business that just does software when you don't have the additional capitalization base that the platform owners have. This is where it's going to be interesting to me to see. There's all these things that I think are being incorrectly reported about Microsoft wanting to stand up like in an Xbox game store in the mobile space that combines both its cloud gaming and content that it has available for King. And I'm like, that's going to be incredibly, and the notion that they're going to take on Google and Apple. And I'm like, that's going to be incredibly difficult even for a multi-trillion-dollar company trying to determine a go-to-market strategy when you're not a platform owner, right? Like Apple and Google are.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ham. That's a great point. And to the idea of protecting Sony's position should not be a factor. It goes back to Cycle Gamer Super Chat. We talked about this, I think, on this show, because that's kind of been a talking point that I've seen. Oh, the regulatory agency shouldn't be protecting Sony, or Sony's position, in the factor. Or, I can't even talk, man. I can't talk. A slow-mo just joined. Protecting Sony's position should not be a factor, and I think we've talked about this on this show, Hamp. And I think you all would agree it's a little more complex than just that. It's also about protecting Sony's ability to compete in the future, but not just Sony, but future competition as well. And I think Hamp, I think you've tweeted about that in some in the past. I think you kind of fleshed out a little bit. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's kind of. I'm trying to think about things that I can talk about and things that I can't. So one thing to consider about industrial bases is, I think what I would draw attention to is certain industrial bases, when they get too far behind the curve, they gain momentum. And they gain momentum in terms of companies going out of business to an extent to which you can't turn that around in a market. And so an analogy is how for various governments have vested interests in making sure that certain industries are propped up. They're essential to their GDP. They're essential to other matters of national interest. And so, for instance, the United States will only allow so much negative financial impact, so much recessionary impact to be borne by the airline industry. Because the airline industry is a significant part of our GDP. They're a significant part of our overall economic capability. They're a significant part of our capability in other areas. And so you will see there is constantly a recurring theme of the things that this country does to make sure that the airline industry is continued to be propped up. So some of the concern in analogous factor is, people hyper focus on the notion that it's protecting Sony. Well, Sony is kind of a singular, kind of monolithic representative of other competition in the market. And so, if Microsoft's position is evaluated to be something that's anti-competitive, the first assessment, the litmus test for that is how does it impact Sony. But the other side of that is obviously how's it going to wind up impacting other people? If it drags Sony down or is a significant blunting force against Sony, then what you look at next is, okay, well, who's next in line after Sony? Well, next in line after Sony is kind of Apple and Google. But of course, Apple and Google kind of don't play in the same end of the pool, and there are significant competitive differences, right, in how they behave on the market. So you kind of bypass them. Once you break past Microsoft, Sony, Tencent, Apple, and Google, you get to players that are significantly different. I know that, you know, the notion has been offered that scale shouldn't matter, but you get to significantly lower levels of scale, right? And you get down to companies that are, you know, maybe in the teens of billions or maybe even less. And you get to companies that aren't really able to leverage significant competitive pushback on Microsoft. And in particular, you get to a point where you're no longer talking about platform holders, as I mentioned before. So I think, you know, again, none of this is to say that, you know, any of the regulatory commissions are right. Nothing is to even say that I necessarily agree personally. Again, I've voiced aspects of how I look at these things from a commercial competitive marketplace versus how I look at them as if I were one of these companies. All of this is just to say this is the right, that to a certain extent can't be denied of the various factors that everybody's kind of looking at and taking into account.
Yeah, that's a great point, Hap. I want to welcome the one and only, the king of KD, Slobo Backslap.
Oh, no, not the king of KD.
Yeah, Slobo, you are too modest, sir. You're way too modest.
I only have a 1.21.
That's good.
Call of Duty right
you don't
now.
play COD.
I don't, but it should be higher.
Well, I mean,
with SBMM, and I don't know that. I mean, with SBMM for somebody who doesn't play like literally all the time, like it's their job, I think that's very respectable.
Yeah, I would think that's very respectful, Slomo. Like that's Slomo. I've played matches with you, and you're just steamrolling people, man. I
wouldn't say steamrolling.
Yeah. Okay. Deli steamrolls people. You're right behind Deli.
Yes, Deli definitely steamrolls people. You looking up, you're like, is that 40 kills?
Yeah, he had 40 kills in one match. I think 42 that we played with him.
He was like, you know, it was nothing. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, he's like, I got lucky. Got a couple guys turn the corner.
That's the king of KD. I am just, you know, I'm just in the room. You know, I'm just in the room.
I hear you, man. No, I hear you, man. But no, thanks for joining, Slomo. I appreciate it, man.
I apologize for not being on soon.
No, it's okay, man. No worries.
Didn't even see the DM where you was like, we're doing it at noon. And so I was like, I had already planned doing the stream for the Dark Pictures game. And then Forte pops in like, hey, so you just not going to do BRAP? I'm like,
oh, Forte, why is Forte harassing you, man?
But here's the thing, I was like, what do you mean? BRAP's not until later. So what?
No worries, Slomo. Yeah. No, it's like, and I, you know, like I said, I asked, you know, in the DM if anyone was available for 12 p.m. So it's not, you know, no worries, man. Just, and actually your timing's perfect because one of the things I'm going to talk about right now is why I think Elden Ring is going to win Game of the Year. And we talked about Elden Ring on Crossfire. And as you know, there was a little bit of back and forth, and you know, you made a great point. Like, you weren't saying that God of War doesn't have an upgrade path with weapons and some of the attacks. What you were saying though, it's not as in depth as Elden Ring.
Yeah, there's not as much choice.
Exactly.
Like,
yes. Yeah.
Like, you can't just go a full on glass cannon magic build or even a full on glass cannon dexterity build, but like, these are things that you can do, and in Elden Ring there's way more variance there, which I'm not saying it's more enjoyable combat. That's very subjective, right? People could very well enjoy the combat of God of War way more than they do of Elden Ring. It's definitely flashier. It's definitely got better like executions, even though that you got some pretty nice ways of executing people in Elden Ring, but that's more subjective. What's not subjective is the ability to have more choice in how you choose to do combat. That's not subjective.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
But people don't like to listen, and they just hear what they want to hear when they're definitely defending something that they really love or care for the most. So it is what it is. There's no shade toward anybody.
A brand or a platform. Somebody was wearing their PlayStation tracksuit. Let me get messy, because as this topic has come up, I haven't been as caustic but as I listen to this, like the notion that somebody would not capitulate to the simple basic definition that Elden Ring is an RPG and God of War Ragnarok is not is kind of flabbergasting to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, that's a big distinction between the two games. I mean, you could say that obviously I think Ragnarok has some RPG flavors to it, but it's not a full blown RPG the way Elden Ring is. But I haven't finished God of War Ragnarok. Now I'm enjoying it. I do have some issues though with Odin. And I think we talked about that, Hamp, yesterday, and Slomo, I think you've beaten the game. I don't know, how did you feel about Odin, the portrayal of Odin in this game?
Oh, that was awesome.
You liked it? See, I'm not feeling it, man. But I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
He reminded me of? He reminded me of some kind of like mob boss. Like
that's what Hamp said.
Yeah, he had that aura about him. I thought it was good.
You like that? Okay,
it was different, because usually Odin is portrayed as some like real. Even though this guy looked old, but like very old and just like not ancient. I can't think of the word that
he looked like Santa Claus on steroids.
Yeah, like it's different. Odin is always portrayed differently. This Odin was very frail looking, very thin. Throughout the entire game, I didn't know, like, can this guy even fight? Like, I don't know. like I didn't know what this guy could do in that. But I like the way you couldn't, like, his lines were delivered so well, and the dialogue for him was so good that you really honestly couldn't tell whether he was being sincere sometimes. Like other people would be like, don't listen to him, he's lying, and you're just like, is he though?
Slow-mo.
It was good. I thought he was good.
You know what you remind me of? I agree with you. You and Hamp actually said the same thing, mob boss. I was looking at him as more like a politician or like a sleazy lawyer. Very smooth talking.
He had more like command than like a sleazy lawyer would have, right? Like he always
politician.
This aura of I'm in control.
Yeah.
You could definitely liken him to Kevin Spacey's character on House of Cards. I think.
Oh yeah.
I think
I could see that. Yeah.
I think one of the things
I got Trump vibes too, by the way, Hamp.
I think one of the things this invokes, and I've definitely got some more perspective that could be seen as scathing, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that way. But the question is like on Odin specifically, as an example, should Odin have been Tommy Shelby? Right? Is that rendition of that character fitting with the God of War franchise and IP? And I think that's where there started to be a little narrative and creative dissonance for me. I get that it's an innovative take. I just didn't know if it stuck the landing for me, and if it felt like it fit.
I get that, and it's a subjective thing. Like some people are going to look at it as a different take, and some people are going to be like, I ain't feeling that. I will, but it's like I think at the same time, even if you don't really care for the direction they went in it, we could all appreciate the performance that was made. I think the performance of the voice actor definitely, like whatever direction he was given, I think he absolutely nailed it. He landed it. But I think we've all beat the game, right?
No,
I'm
I have not.
Okay,
No.
all right.
I have not beat the game. Hamp has not beat the game either.
No,
Okay.
right.
Wait, I would say I would love to hear your thoughts on it, on him in particular, when you guys finish the game, because
Okay.
there's some things there that
Great, Odin's Raven.
there's some things there that I have seen that you guys haven't quite seen yet,
Okay.
and I wonder how that would may change your opinion.
Okay. Yeah. So I look, I certainly appreciate I appreciate Sony Santa Monica's vision for Odin and that they went that, like, I can appreciate, like, they did doing something different than what I would have anticipated. But again, it doesn't feel like Odin to me. But I do appreciate the dialogue, Odin's dialogue, and his kind of like, I think you said it somewhere, like, hey, he doesn't seem like that bad of a guy,
Yeah, he has his moments where you're just like, okay.
there's a little
like,
there's depth to him in that regard, I think, and I think that's fascinating about the portrayal of Odin in this game. But his design as a character, I'm just kind of now Thor. I love Thor's design. I love the presentation, their version of Thor in Ragnarok. I think that they nailed it. I love it.
Yeah. One, like, it's kind of like lore accurate to have Thor be like this huge guy.
Yeah.
So, like,
With a
not
big belly,
looking like Hemsworth, but looking like
Chris Hemsworth.
a guy that basically drinks beer for breakfast. But I think I also kind of liked his whole personality. Like, I do have some gripes with, like, say, the middle parts where it's just like, hey, let's pick some berries. Hey, let's go on a little boat ride.
Oh yeah, I got to be honest with you, like that picking berries and that part of the game, just what I wasn't a fan of, and I don't want to give too much away because I know Hamp may not be there yet, but there's some parts of the game that I could have done without. That one particular, and some others. Yeah,
And I mean, that doesn't. I mean, whether or not that's given away or is that, my impressions of the game are so the game suffers from some Red Dead Redemption 2-isms. Just and the difference there is with Red Dead Redemption 2, I finally came around to the acceptance that some of that was done just to ground you and immerse you in kind of that Old West environment, right? But I don't necessarily feel like there's any need to ground me and immerse me in this notion that I'm living in one of the 9 realms, right? I think that only goes so far. And so when things like that come out, it will cause an impact on pacing. It will cause other concerns with just kind of how that narrative is strung together.
Yeah. Look, it's a great look. Again, these are criticisms I have of the game, but overall, it's still a good game. It's still a solid game. But but I wouldn't say it's a perfect game. I wouldn't say that I don't have issues with certain elements of the game, like that are parts that, like, I'm like, okay, like I don't want to play this now. Like there's one part the part that you mentioned, I was like, I didn't want to play it. I put the controller. I was like, I don't want to do this. This is boring. This is not, but there's some great dialogue, some great voice acting. There's some great, action set pieces. But I think this is my. Now I haven't beaten God of War Ragnarok yet, so this could change. But I think if Elden Ring wins Game of the Year, and I say this, I think on Crossfire Slow-Mo, I think it's because of the zeitgeist of Elden Ring at the time was just on a different level.
Impact.
The impact of it, yeah,
was crazy. Like, no maidens. You're maidenless, like the memes were legendary.
Do you remember that? Oh, you're maidenless.
Yeah, like, that was going on into like early summer that people were saying things like that. I think the difference between the two, and of course, like, you could look at Elden Ring and say that some of the open world game design ideas that From Software went with were not very up to date. They were very, so in some ways, archaic. But it's still new-ish to the Souls genre and From Software in general. But likewise, you can say for God of War Ragnarok that it treads on a lot of ground that they had already paved, and
Yeah.
but just does it in a grander way. More story, more puzzles, more. They take the combat and they improved upon it, but like there's nothing there that's like, oh, like this is like going to change the way games are going to be made for this generation. No, because a lot of what they did in this game is stuff that they did in 2018. So but it's not saying it's not high quality, because it's absolutely high quality, but it's just like I see a lot of like talk about like, well, Elden Ring didn't do anything really innovative, so why should it really be win game of the year? It's like it's worthy of nomination, but should it win? But what did Ragnarok do that was innovative?
I
Honestly,
think
does any game that is nominated for game of the year really innovative at all? Like, I know they put that in the description. Stray's not really innovative.
you play as a cat. Come on, man.
That's
joking.
it, playing as a cat.
I'm joking. I'm totally. We've had other cat protagonists in video games, but no, but Slomo, I think where, like you said, like it didn't do anything. Ragnarok hasn't done anything, new or revolutionary with the gaming industry. But more importantly, it didn't do anything revolutionary as 2018 did for that series.
Mm-hmm.
The way Elden Ring has done for the Souls formula, like the Souls formula, what Elden Ring did for Souls was kind of what I've argued this, what Breath of the Wild did for Zelda. Introduced that open world and nailed it. Like, again, it's not perfect for the reasons you mentioned, Slomo, but and I'll say this, like I know this is when I would imagine there's more people like you, Slomo, who aren't Souls fans that played this game, because I'm a Souls fan, and I know that you didn't like Sekiro, you didn't like the other Souls.
I always thought in the past, before I played any Souls game, that the combat looked janky to me, and it was mostly.
I remember you saying that, yeah. Which I disagree.
I think the jank is still present. The jank is there in animations and like the way the motion matching isn't perfect when, say, you're dropping from a ledge onto the ground and certain things like that. Like, there's certain aspects of it that you kind of expect from a AAA game that still aren't there, and it's because the engine is a little old, and it may need to be updated. And they use in Elden Ring itself, like shout out to Luca. Luca said this, that a lot of the animations that are in Elden Ring, exact same animations they've been using since the dawn of time, or the dawn of From Software, since the beginning. They're just the same stuff, which is all fine. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Like, well, wait, that's not right. If it ain't broke, though, yeah, whatever. Like, that's the saying. So, y'all know what I'm talking about. Anyway, but at the same time, like, I never played. Only my first Souls game was Demon Souls remake on PS5, and I enjoyed it, even though I didn't finish it, because I just got too caught up with other games. I beat like 3 or 4 bosses. I was having a good time, but with Elden Ring, like, I platinumed Elden Ring on PlayStation, and not just like the save scum platinum, where people beat the game really just one time and then they just kept their save and went back and did the other quest or whatever steps they needed to be able to choose the other 2 endings that have trophies. No, I actually had like 4 separate characters, and 3 of them I made sure I did the separate endings for those, and I probably got over 100 hours, well over 150 hours in each one of my characters. Like, that's how much I was into Elden Ring. And I think
I was surprised to hear that, by the way, Slim. I was like, really? I was like, I know your feelings about Souls games, but again, I imagine there's other people like you who who did this, who weren't really quote unquote Souls gamers.
Right, and I think that impact is why I think Elden Ring will win more awards, but God of War will win Game of the Year. Similar to like a reverse of what happened in 2018 with Red Dead 2 and God of War 2018. But I fully understand people feeling like Elden Ring is more deserving because of the impact that it had on the gaming community and the industry. More people tried that game out and played that game more than any other From Software game in the past, by far. And it definitely opened up Souls games to a whole different demographic that had previously either felt like they were apprehensive about playing those kind of games because of the difficulty or whatever, whatever it may be. People tried those games in far bigger percentages than in the past, and I'm not quite certain that God of War Ragnarok will have the same impact overall. But,
well, and the other thing, I mean, from what I've seen of God of War Ragnarok, my concerns with it are, I mean, I in my perspective, what I would hold is that from narrative structure, cinematic quality, and even kind of that pulling on the heartstrings factor, I think Naughty Dog has that on lock. And really kind of SIE as a stable of studios kind of does. My concerns with God of War Ragnarok is I feel like some of the stylistic choices, we talk about the Odin modeling, not just the modeling, I can get past the modeling, but what I said to BRAP yesterday was, there's a scene, since we've called out and mentioned that these characters are in the game, there's a scene where there's Odin, Thor, Atreus, Kratos. And if I walked into a room and that scene was going on and my eyes were closed and I didn't know that somebody was playing Ragnarok, I would have thought I was listening to a GTA 5 scene. And that's an issue, that's a consumption issue where I don't know that lands for all gamers. But from the gameplay perspective, the thing that I have concern with God of War Ragnarok, and this is a matter of concern, again, these are nitpicks. There's no question that the top 2 games of the year that are going to be in discussion are Elden Ring and Ragnarok, and I don't think that that's undeserved. But I think the thing that's going to need to be considered and discussed after this is that there are things in God of War Ragnarok in terms of how it bridges the timeline in gameplay and forward evolution of game design and implementation from God of War 2018 to now, that in the past, in that 4-year cycle, may not have felt like a shortfall to us, but I think it does now, and I think that's a matter of where the industry is evolving and things like I mentioned before about how demanding gamers are. In the 4-year span, the fact of the matter is that God of War Ragnarok still leans very heavily on QuickTime events, right?
Jerry.
Uh-oh.
No, we're going to hold on a second. Sorry.
Jerry.
This man's always be
Oh man, happy.
Yeah, sorry. I had a reminder go off. So, but my concern is like the game from a gameplay mechanic perspective, the game still leans very heavily on QuickTime events. And for instance, one of those QuickTime events is in the very opening sequence of the game, in a scene that I feel like was marketed and conveyed as if it was something of greater impact, and much in the same way that Tomb Raider bamboozled me right into believing that when you talk about the scene where like Lara Croft is like sliding down the hill and you really don't have control of the character, but you could just flip the analog stick left and right to make her shift position. That scene came off to me like that, and I was disappointed when I experienced that in Tomb Raider, and that was 9 years ago. And so that to me, like, I get it. It moves the story forward. There's a fight in the opening of the game that is amazingly similar to a fight that's in 2018 that really isn't that differentiated, and that almost I think that maybe was constructed based on reuse of that actual environmental code with just new textures layered on top of it. Like, and things like that are problematic where polish and delivery is there and is great and it's a great experience, but it does make me scratch my head and it does make me ask questions. It with particular regard to I don't know that that's a satisfactory move of the needle in a 4-year time span.
Oh, well, I think they definitely patterned that fight specifically off of the impact that the fight in 2018
Boulder,
had on gamers. Like that fight really kind of
Boulder,
set the bar.
Yeah.
So, but I think the impact isn't the same because you're kind of treading on the same ground. I did enjoy the fight in Ragnarok though. I thought it was pretty awesome. But again, the impact isn't as strong as the impact in the first game, because that was the one that really kind of like opened your eyes to what to expect from the boss fights in this game,
Yeah.
and you were already prepared and expecting that going into Ragnarok before you even load the game up.
Yeah, and I don't want to be asked to push the damn circle button anymore to move damn trees. Okay, like that's not gameplay. That should be an expectation for me. That's busy work. And again, same thing. Red Dead Redemption 2 had the same thing. They made you bang a wagon wheel back onto a stage for no reason. That's not a repeatable skill. Doesn't add to your progression. But it was just an element put there to increase your immersion. But again, several years after the fact, I don't know that we need to lean on structures like that.
Yeah, that's a fair point, Hamp. I mean, and those are, again, those are kind of minor annoyances that I have with the game. And again, like I'm going to have to repeat this because I know somebody who listens to the show later on is like, oh, you guys are hating on God of War Ragnarok. It's an amazing game. What are you smoking? No, like I think, we all agree here. It's a great experience. It's a great game, but there's some issues there. And as we talk about, game of the year, and for some of those issues, like that's why it's not for me. Again, this could change. Like I admit it could change. Like I could beat the game and be like, holy shit, this is my game of the year now. But where I'm at now, I think Elden Ring's gonna win the game of the year. I just feel like for me, the sense of exploration, and I understand they're different games. One's an RPG, one's an action adventure game with elements of RPG in it. But for me, I think the adventure of Elden Ring was so like wow for me. Like it was the sense of exploration and mystery and wanting to go to different places and fight new bosses and there's a certain sense of satisfaction that you get when you beat a Souls boss that I haven't experienced in any other game that I've played where I've beaten a boss. There's different strategies, there's different ways to approach a boss. And sometimes there's specific builds you need to have. In the case of what was it, Melania the Blade? Was that her name? I forget her name. I have her statue here in my room.
It's Millennia Blade of Milica.
Blade of Milica, yeah. And so for that one, you the best way to beat her was to have the bleed build where you could stun her and just destroy her, but you stood a better chance.
Yeah.
But
mostly everybody basically struggled through that one and was just happy to beat her at the end.
Yeah, she was the toughest boss in the game. She might be one of the most difficult Souls bosses of any Souls games that I played. Like she's up there.
Like it's because her AI strategy completely changes up in the second phase. Like it's completely.
It's completely different. I can't tell you how many times she killed with that damn rot bomb that she drops. Which you gives that
the rot flower thing.
Yeah. I'm like, no. I'm like, I ran away. I'm like, but I'm dead.
The worst is the water. Was it the water something foul attack where she levitates up in the air?
Yes.
Like it. You think you've dodged out of the way?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
Like the AOE on that attack is
her AOE was ridiculous.
It was absolutely ridiculous.
No, but see, that's what I'm saying. Like obviously look, there's some bias here from BRAP because I'm a Souls fan, but for me, I mean, those things factor into that experience and that sense of accomplishment, that sense of like just exploration in Elden Ring, like Slomo, like just like I found myself like wanting to go to different places, wanting to do things, wanting to explore dungeons or new caves, wanting to find, what were those little like little arenas where you had those little mini bosses? What were they called? Do you know what I'm talking about, Slomo? Like they were like, it was like a concrete cylinder in the ground. You step on it, and then like a fog would surround it, and then it'll be like another enemy, like a mini boss.
Oh yeah, I forgot. They called them. They were like prisons. I forgot what the word is though. They're literally in the lore. They are a prison. It was like the enemy you're fighting is literally imprisoned in there. But I forgot the name of them. I know exactly what you're talking about. But yeah, like they're completely optional, and you can just ride right on past it on torrent. But you could also like go ahead and do that and get get the really cool rewards you would get from it. I think my favorite one is taking down the one of those Black Knife assassins that's in the one of those prisons, like on the western side of the map, because from that you get the summon to summon that same enemy you killed and have that enemy fight with you.
Does he have like bleed damage?
Yes.
Yeah, I used him against Millennia. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. He's actually really him and the Mimic were the
they nerfed that Mimic.
Yeah, the Mimic was a little OP.
Yeah.
That Mimic was a little OP. Yeah, but just those big boss battles too. I mean, it just So I think for me, like I said, I mean, it's just that sense of exploration, the sense of awe, sense of wonderment. And even though like I've played other Souls games, it did for Souls games what, like I said, Breath of the Wild did for Zelda, and maybe to an extent what God of War 2018 did for the God of War franchise. You just took it to that next level.
Yeah, and I should mention, like, these, when we say things that may seem like detractions about the game, again, I don't know how many times we've mentioned that it's a great game. This is also a discussion of the differences, is the differences of great games in comparison to other great games, right? So we're still saying that the game is good. We are talking about things that maybe should be borne in mind, things that definitely lend questions to how the studios evolve their formula for kind of their next approach. I do apologize, by the way. I think I said Naughty Dog earlier instead of Sony Santa Monica, because, again, all of those studios are very high caliber studios. And so when we talk about those games, any detractions should be considered as a notion of, detractions against what might arguably otherwise be considered perfection. I mean, the thing for God of War Ragnarok for me is, I've been playing Miles Morales on PC this week, and Uncharted 4, A Thief's End on PC this week, as well as part of the Lost Legacy collection. And while, again, God of War Ragnarok has an incredible amount of polish and delivery and presentation, at the end of the day, my feeling as a gamer has been I've been more excited and I've had more fun, right, mainly based on fluidity of movement and gameplay mechanics, right, playing Uncharted 4 and Miles Morales on PC. And so, again, those things bear in mind reasons and causes for discussion.
Yeah, that's a great point, Hamp. So, Slow-Mo, I'll ask you this question since you have beat both games. Mm-hmm. And what's your game of the year, man?
My game of the year is still going to be Elden Ring, but just only slightly. Okay. And I feel like it changes maybe like every couple days, because after I beat God of War, I was like, all right, that was a pretty epic way to end the game. I something that I recognize, and the reason why I like for most days I say Elden Ring gets the edges God of War Ragnarok out, is because when I started playing Elden Ring in February, I didn't stop playing it until April. I beat it in March and just kept playing it and kept playing it, and I beat it 4 more times. And I'm more than willing to help anyone else that jumps in it, on at least on PlayStation, because I own it on PC as well, and I haven't beat it on PC yet. But been helping other friends get through the game, and just like I never got tired of it. Whereas with God of War Ragnarok, in the beginning, I was doing everything. I was just like, oh, here's a side quest. Hey, you want me to go find your son?
I did too, Slow-Mo. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of the side quests, I will say, Sony Santa Monica addressed a lot of the criticisms that people had about the first game. Too many of the boss fights is just a troll, with a different color and a different element. Yeah. The side quests weren't very all that weren't all that memorable at all. But like, these side quests are very detailed. They do your typical 3 parts. Like, it's a 3-part side quest. You go here, it ends there, like at the 3rd one. But each quest, though, narrative wise, is not copy pasta like you get from Ubisoft. So there is that. But like, I was just doing everything. And then maybe around like the 20 220, maybe about the 25-hour mark, it's like I hit a wall, and I was just like, you know what? Pause on that side quest, sir. I'm good. I'm just gonna finish the game now. Like it's like at some point I just wanted to finish the story, and it does a very good method of having after you finish a quest, and then it opens up the very next main mission, the very next main quest to continue the story on. That like a character would tell you, hey, you know, Kratos, you don't have to go there yet. We still have, and they literally name the quest that you still have outstanding to do.
Yeah.
But I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
so it was
that was
like,
cool. Yeah.
You can actually like it reminded you, oh yeah, I do need to do that. And so part of the reason why I did so many of the side quests is I was reminded, hey, you know, you still have to save this person, and you still have to go address this and deal with this conflict. And I'm like, yeah, I still do need to do that. But at some point I was just like, bro, I need to finish this. And a lot of the stuff I know I can do post game. Like I haven't
You do it, go
uninstalled
back
from
and do
my
it.
Yeah, I beat the game. There's some quests that open up after you beat the game. So there's post-game content. So there's like at least 2 big quests that I won't mention because, of course, mentioning them will be spoilers. But there's 2 very big quests that you have to do that you can do after the game is over. In addition to all the other little side quests that you can do that you didn't finish or didn't start. And so there is things for me to still do, and I'm gonna get back to that once I get a lot of the other games that I feel are more pressing at the moment off my my docket or my to-do list. But it's I mean I like it, but I noticed my fatigue with the multitude of puzzles and my fatigue with
Yeah, I hear you, man.
all the side quests that would get thrown in front of me
Yeah.
while I'm trying to finish the game, to the point where I was just like, it was very different, you know, than how I was with Elden Ring, where
Yeah.
I was ready to do everything in that world. So that's why as of this moment, who knows how I'm gonna feel once the December 8th hits and the VGAs come out. But yeah, my personal game of the year is slightly Elden Ring right now.
Yeah, and I'm leaning still Elden Ring. Still, again, like I said, that could change after I beat the game. But I definitely want to do a spoiler cast when we all beat the game. It's strictly, I don't know if he's still in the live chat. He was here. He's got some. I think he. It sounded like he has some issues with the game too. And while he's not saying it's a bad game, I think he did say it's a very good game, but there's some issues there. But I would like to do a spoiler cast, get strict on you, Slimmo, and some other folks, to kind of talk about the game in its entirety. I'd be interested to get everyone's, opinions on this. Well, look, it is 2:00 and I want to go play some God of War Ragnarok and go eat some food. My wife's actually started cooking already, so and she does like some pre-Thanksgiving stuff. So I'm going to be eating a lot, Slimmo. I'll be eating a lot. So thank you, Cryptosy. Look, I want to give a big shout out to everyone in the live chat. Thank you all for hanging out with us today. I know it was kind of an impromptu thing last minute, but I definitely appreciate it. Do me a favor, hit that like button if you're new. Consider subscribing, hitting the bell for notifications so you're alerted when we go live or when new content releases. And we also want to give a thank you to Gaming Forte, who stopped by for a little bit. He was at work today, and also Hamp, who had to leave for work as well. But and then Slimmo, hey man, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us, man. Definitely appreciate it. Are you guys doing DPS this week or no?
No,
like Friday maybe. No.
Okay. I made the announcement on Twitter earlier this morning. We are canceling DPS for this week because we normally go live Thursdays 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thursday is Thanksgiving. We definitely ain't doing that. So no, and we just kind of decided let's just give it a break. not try to do Friday, because we actually switched the day to a Friday a few weeks ago, and it's just like we need people to understand that we're gonna try to stick to the day that we're supposed to go live on. So we'll be back next week. But if you're looking for some content, I did stream 2 hours of The Dark Pictures, The Devil in Me, that just came out a few weeks ago. I did stream that on my channel, Slow Mo Backslap, earlier today. So go check that out if you got some free time to and you want to, because we'll see if you like the game. You might want to play it yourself. And other than that, Slow Mo Backslap on everything: Twitch, Twitter, TikTok, Hive. You can't say Hive. People get upset.
Yeah, I saw that. What are you talking about? Yeah. You guys are crazy. Twitter's not going anywhere.
Stop talking about Hive. Don't talk about Hive. But, it's crazy. But no, like I had a good time as usual.
Yeah, don't post memes of Tom from MySpace either. Apparently that's not good. But no, Somo, thank you again, man. Always appreciate it. And you can find me on BRAP_podcast on Twitter and at BRAP on Hive. Those are the 2 social media platforms I'm on right now. Maybe I go on TikTok at some point. Maybe do like shorts or something. I don't know. We'll see. But look, everyone, have for those of you in the U.S. with us, have a safe, happy Thanksgiving. Look, I'm not a big fan of Thanksgiving, but I'll get into that on another podcast. Why I'm not. I think Jay-Z said it the best, Slow-Mo. I don't know if you know what line I'm referred to, but when Jay-Z says Thanksgiving disguised as a feast, I don't know. I don't know. Huh?
Bars.
I'm just saying, but bars. I'm just saying. There's my wife doesn't like when I talk about what happened to the Native Americans. So
of course not.
To my kids, well, they should know that right now. I'm like, no, they need to know.
No. If you don't tell them, school definitely ain't gonna tell them. So,
especially now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyhow, but no, everyone have a. Yeah, right. Someone we'll be on here for another hour. Have a happy Thanksgiving, everyone. And I'm gonna look. You know what's really cool about this Thanksgiving, though, Slow-Mo? The World Cup. So I will be watching World Cup today, tomorrow, Friday. U.S. plays England at 2:00 p.m. Eastern time. So I'll be watching that. I already told my wife. I was like, look, I'm going out.
I'm going to be watching real football, American football. Okay. All day long, 3 football games. Watch the Cowboys lose. Watch the
You're talking about Cowboys are the best team in the NFL now.
You know what? I'm leaving.
Have you? I've seen that conversation come up a bit. I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, I understand they destroyed the Minnesota Vikings, but I don't know, man. Best team right now?
I don't think they're the best team. And they're the Cowboys, so you know what's going to happen. They're going to lose first round in the playoffs as usual. So, yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't be wrong. And look, Slow-Mo, I think it's just time for me to concede something real quick while I have you on the show and we're talking about football.
I already know what you're going to say. That's what you said.
You were right about Carson Wentz.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I know.
You were right. I mean, yeah. I mean, oh man, I don't. It's crazy to see the difference between how this team plays under Taylor Heineke versus Carson Wentz. I think you would agree, Slow-Mo, it's a different football team, man.
It's like night and day.
Yeah, I saw somebody say Odell Beckham Jr. comes to the Cowboys. Yeah, great point, Slow-Mo. If he was that good, he wouldn't
be on the team.
He wouldn't be unemployed right now. Come on.
I do gotta run. These kids staring at me.
No doubt. But
they need me to feed them. But I'm out, Brad.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later.
Everybody have a great Thanksgiving. Holiday,
all right.
Whatever you want to call it.
Yep. All right, everyone. Take care. We will see you next time.